practice. We've been away for a long time. We haven't practiced together. We haven't seen one another. But this is a way of trying to stay connected to the practice and stay connected to one another as best we can. So what we're doing is a sort of a class format. It's not a reference video, so it's designed for you to follow along, indoors preferably or probably, and rather than be something that you watch and then go out and practice like a video for weapons practice. So you want to make sure you have enough space. You want to get a space ready, and it's also preferable if that space has a soft floor. Carpet or a rug or a yoga mat might work. If you can't have a soft floor, you can still do most of what we're going to do. You'll just want to avoid doing things like our rolling exercises, and you probably don't want to sit in seiza on a hard surface. That can be very hard on your knees and your feet. So I don't recommend sitting in seiza on a hard surface, but you can do most of what we're going to do in this session if you don't have the soft surface. So before we continue and before we get into our activities, I want to reflect a little bit about what we've been going through and what relevance we can draw to our Aikido practice. In many ways, the last week or so, 2 weeks, has been very slow for many of us. Many of us have been working a lot less or haven't been going into work or not going into school, and we certainly haven't been doing Aikido practice. When we're out and about, if we're out and about, very often there's fewer people around. If you go to a store, it might be not very crowded. Sometimes when you're driving around, not a lot of traffic. So there's a kind of slowness to our experience in this time of isolation. And that can be very interesting, and it can be very creative sometimes. That kind of slowing down can be a good time for reflection. And if that's been your experience, it's been my experience in this last bit of time, it's good to remember that it's not everyone's experience. It's good to remember that there are those out there who are really moving quite quickly, moving quite fast, who are working very hard and working a lot more than usual. People in the healthcare industry, healthcare providers are obviously working very hard right now. People who deliver services and deliver goods are working very hard right now, and probably more hours, and trying to do things a lot quicker than usual. People involved in the manufacture of healthcare products are probably working a lot harder, a lot more, and a lot faster right now. Teachers, even though they're not in school right now, have likely been working very hard to try to put their lessons and put their classes online, put things in a format where students can continue to learn as they're away from school. So on the one hand, the experiences that we've gone through for many of us have been about slowing down, staying put, and that gives us a good time for thinking and for reflection. But for a lot of people, our isolating experiences are also about working very hard and revving up and moving very quickly. So to me, there's been this very interesting relationship between speed and slowness, between kind of slowing down and becoming thoughtful and reflective, but also the need to speed up and move and work in an effortful and maybe even frenzied way, in the relationship between these two types of experiences. And that got me to thinking a little bit about Aikido practice. Aikido practice is very often very vibrant, a lot of vibrant, energetic movement happening in Aikido practice. And a lot of times that can cause us not to see the slowness or the stillness that is within the practice. Right? There is a kind of slowness or a kind of stillness that's within Aikido practice. And I think that slowness and stillness is directly related to the vibrancy and the speed that we often see in Aikido movements, Aikido techniques, and Aikido practice in general. So our time away from the dojo, I think, is an opportunity to think about this relationship and to go into a kind of slow experience of Aikido where we can examine some very basic things. And then through examining and looking and practicing these basic things in a very focused manner, in a very reflective manner, that can affect and cultivate the vibrancy, the overall vibrancy of our practice. And one last thing I'd like to say about speed in practice, and many of you have heard me say this in the dojo before. Very often Aikido looks fast. Very often senior practitioners of Aikido look like they're doing things very quickly. But sometimes, many times, that's not the case at all. Many times a high-level Aikido practitioner can look very fast but isn't fast at all. That what appears to be speed is really connection. Connection, sensibility, connection to movement, connection to a body that's moving. These things can give the illusion and sometimes the effect of speed. And then when we try to replicate that by trying to be fast, by introducing a kind of willful speed into our practice, then our practice can sometimes become very frenzied and frenetic and not very good. So that's another interesting relationship between speed and slowness in Aikido. So one of the things that I'm hoping to do in our reflections and in our exercises in this session is to think about how when we slow down and think and focus on some of the very minute and basic movements that we do, that can cultivate not speed, especially willful frenetic speed, but cultivate and help support and help grow a kind of vibrancy in our practice. And that vibrancy can very often look like speed or feel like speed, but it's really a much deeper and a much more complex form of liveliness. Right? So my hope is, my thinking is that by focusing on, in a kind of slow, methodical, and deep way, by focusing on some very small things in our practice right now, that we can cultivate eventually this sense of greater liveliness and greater vibrancy in our practice. So we begin our Aikido practice with seated deep breathing. Ideally we do this in Seiza. If you can't sit in Seiza, then of course you can sit cross-legged. I put my left palm on top of right, my thumbs touch, so I'm forming sort of a circle with my thumbs, and then this goes right in front of my belt, right in front of my center, my hara. And then I want to keep my back straight but not stiff. I want to have the feeling that my spine is relaxed but also opening up, extending. My shoulders I'm going to keep down and relaxed. I'm going to keep my shoulders over my hips or a little bit in front of my hips. And I'm going to try to keep my face, especially my chin, on a straight, even plane, so I don't want to be looking down very much. Of course, I don't want to be looking up either. I'm a straight, even plane, like so. And then I'm breathing deep into my center, and I'm going to keep my eyes open for this seated deep breathing exercise. I'm breathing deep into my center, so this is deep abdominal breathing, not high into my chest. I'm trying to breathe, if possible, through my nose most of the time. Now I'm going to turn toward the side so you can get another view of the type of posture that this breathing cultivates. This particular breathing exercise here that we just did is called Furutama, shaking the ball or shaking the soul. This is an exercise that O-sensei borrowed from some Shinto ascetic practices. So what we're doing is we are bringing our hands together on our center line, then they drop down our center line, left palm comes on top of right, they clasp, and then we gently shake our hands in front of our center and breathe deeply into our center. And what we're doing in this exercise is, first of all, we're drawing attention to our center line by bringing our hands to our center line and down our center line. And then we're bringing our attention to our center by leaving our hands in front of our center and shaking. The shaking helps bring attention here to our center. And that shaking also helps our upper body and our arms to relax. Our upper body is a place where we keep a lot of tension. We constrict a lot in our upper body. So the shaking helps that to relax. And as you do this more often and pay deeper attention to it, you can also feel your spine relax through this vibrating movement. And gradually the shaking diminishes, and we continue to breathe deeply into our center, and you can feel the effects of that shaking. You can feel the relaxation in your upper body, in your arms and your shoulders, and also in your spine, and you can think about that and dwell on that as you continue to breathe deeply into your center. Now in this squatting position, we want to think about keeping our spine straight again, but also relaxed and extended. And just like when we were doing our seated deep breathing, my face wants to be on an even plane, not looking down, not looking up, on an even plane. My vision has a sense of openness to it. And now, two-handed Shomanuchi, Ichi, Ni, San, Shi, Go, Roku, Shichi, Hachi, Ku, Ju. Now when doing these stretches, you want to try to bend at your hips rather than from your lower back. So I don't want to be bending here. I want to be bending here. Again, the idea is I want to feel my spine extending and relaxing rather than crunching up. Again, with this stretch, I'm going to try to have the bend come more from the hips rather than my lower back. And I'm trying to have the feeling of my spine opening up and extending, not crunching up and bending over. Now the exercise we just did with our arms a moment ago is a good opportunity to, again, cultivate an awareness of our center line and relate our body, especially our arms and hands, to our center line. So when I'm doing this windmill exercise, I'm not just moving my arms in a circular fashion. My hands are coming to the center line, and then they're traveling up that center line. So the circularity of my arms is related directly to the line that moves from my center straight up through my spine and the crown of my head. So there's a linearity, right? A linear kind of way of thinking or way of experiencing related to this circular movement. So the hands are coming up my center line as my arms are moving in a circle. And then when we go in the opposite direction, my hands are coming down my center line. So again, the line that runs from my center up through my spine is directly related to the circular movement of my arms. So I'm not just waving my arms around, I'm finding the center line with my hands. And then when we do this individually with our arms, again, my hand travels up my center line. And my other hand travels up my center line. So again, I'm not just raising my hands and arms, I'm relating to my center and my center line. And for this last portion of the exercise, where our arms are moving individually, I'm also thinking about keeping my hands open, feeling the inside of my palm. My fingers are spread a little bit, but my hand is relaxed, right? I'm not crunching it up like this or tight like this. My hand is open and relaxed. And of course in Aikido, we very often refer to this movement as, or this gesture as kokyu. So essentially the last portion of this arm and shoulder exercise is also a kokyu exercise. And now another breathing exercise. In this breathing exercise, again, we're concentrating or putting our attention on our center line and then bringing our center line closer to the ground. And similar to some of the stretches we were doing earlier, I want to bend at my hips rather than my back, so my back isn't crunching. I'm not curving my back. Right? My back is staying straight. I can feel it relax and extend as I get closer to the ground. And then open up, a sense of extending upward, pausing your breath, and then exhaling. And on the exhale, again, I'm thinking about my hands. My hands are opening up. I can feel my palms. They're relaxed but extended. So very similar to what we were doing when we were doing this exercise. And it's very much a kokyu movement, a kokyu gesture. So the exhaling in this breathing exercise is also cultivating kokyu. Now we'll practice side-to-side rolling. Again, this is something you'll want to skip if you don't have a soft surface to do this on. Also, you probably don't have a large amount of space where you are to do this. So we're going to do a version of side-to-side rolling that's a little more compact, and perhaps you're able to do it in the space that you're in. So we'll come back to this position here. And again, side-to-side rolling on one side, over onto my other side. I'm rolling over my hips and a little bit on my lower back, and then onto my other side. And my core, my center is tight, not rigid, but firm. And it feels a little bit like I'm rolling around that firm core. That is the center, and that everything else is rolling around that. Sort of like how you might imagine a gyroscope. As you do a few of these, you should feel that this is a good workout for your core. Your center is getting stronger from doing this. Another thing we're doing is we're also cultivating both a softer relationship to the ground and a more circular relationship to the ground. So, cultivating that softer relationship and more circular relationship to the ground is going to find its way into all of our ukemi, even when we're not specifically doing side-to-side ukemi. As we grow and develop in the art, as we grow and develop in our ukemi is going to get softer. We're going to have a softer relationship to the ground. Often that means a very circular, curvilinear relationship to the ground. So at a fundamental level, that's what we're working on here, at a very basic level. Softer, curvilinear, circular relationship to the ground. So now we're going to practice Hanmi. And it may sound strange to think of Hanmi as something that we practice. Hanmi is our basic ready stance. And once we learn it, we probably don't give it too much thought. And in Aikido, we don't have a lot of elaborate stances, and we don't put a lot of emphasis on standing in particular ways when we're doing some of the things that we do. But we can look closely at Hanmi and learn a lot from it, and we can also cultivate some things that find their way into the rest of our practice by thinking about our Hanmi very closely and looking at it very closely. So, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to stand in right Hanmi, and remember our heels are in alignment, and my back foot, I'll stand this way, is either facing 90 degrees straight out or 45 degrees, a little bit turned, depending on what is comfortable to you. Now I'm not standing in a rigid fashion, I'm not straight up. My knees are bent a little bit, but not too much. So Hanmi is not a really low stance, it's very natural. In fact, if I go here, in order to get to Hanmi, I'm just taking a very natural single step. Right? So not a very elongated stance. There's something very natural to the Hanmi stance. And then I want to get my hands and arms in a ready position on my center line, nice and open, relaxed, where I can feel my palms. And again, the positioning of my arms is very much like Kokyu. So this is Hanmi. I'm in right Hanmi, my right leg is forward. Left Hanmi, and back to right Hanmi. And one of the ways that we can practice our Hanmi, or one of the things that we can focus on when we practice our Hanmi, is our center. Right? So much of our Aikido practice comes back to our center. So in Hanmi, when I'm switching back and forth between left Hanmi and right Hanmi, I want to try to keep my center on an even line, on an even plane. So as I'm switching my legs and feet back and forth, I don't want my center to bounce up and down. Right? So I'm cultivating a kind of pliability in my body by doing that, and I'm also cultivating an awareness of my center. So let's practice going back and forth between right Hanmi and left Hanmi with that in mind. I'm trying to keep my center an even plane. So we'll start in right Hanmi, go left, back to right, after doing this a few times, one of the things that we can further pay attention to is our upper body, right? We're spending a lot of time and a lot of energy trying not to move our center up and down, but we don't want that to result in being stiff anywhere, especially in our upper body. We don't want to get tight up here trying to keep our center on this even plane. So we keep our center on this even plane, but I'm staying relaxed here. So let's do a few more at this pace, thinking about keeping our shoulders and upper body relaxed, keeping our center on an even plane. Now let's continue with Hanmi stance exercise, and let's continue to expand our attention a little bit. I've been trying to keep my shoulders and upper body relaxed as I'm switching back and forth between the two Hanmis. Now I'm going to think about my head and how it's related to my spine. I'm going to try to feel my spine throughout this exercise, feel it relax and extend up through the crown of my head, and then again, like with some of the breathing exercises we did, I'm going to try to keep my head on an even plane, focusing and looking outward rather than down, right? So I'm going to keep my chin at an even plane, much like my center, but I'm still going to be relaxed. I'm going to have a relaxed spine that feels open and extended. Now let's take all of those qualities that we just thought about and worked on in these exercises, and let's do them all just at a slightly higher pace. Not a frenetic pace, but we want to still maintain that sense of attentive focus and relaxation, but let's bring it up a notch. Let's raise the gear just a little bit as we go back and forth between right Hanmi and left Hanmi. Now let's practice Tenkan. I'm going to start in right Hanmi, and I'm turning on my front leg in the direction of my back, 180 degrees. So when I'm done with one Tenkan, I'm always facing in the opposite direction. Now let's go to left Hanmi, Tenkan. Back to right Hanmi. Back to left Hanmi. Now, Irimitenkan. Going back to right Hanmi, step with my back leg, and then do a Tenkan. I don't have to switch back and forth between right and left because after I do my first Irimitenkan, I'm going to be in left Hanmi. Right? So I'm just going to practice Irimitenkan. Automatically, I'm practicing both sides. Now, let's slow it down a bit and look at some details. First of all, when we're first introduced to Tenkan, when we first learn it, we probably have a very big radius to our circular movement. And that's okay, that's necessary for learning, and it's necessary to get comfortable and accustomed to that sort of circular movement in our bodies. But as we get more comfortable and as we advance and as we grow, we want the radius of our Tenkan to become tighter around our center. So, we'll start in right Hanmi. And this is how we very often do Tenkan in the early stages of our practice. Again, a big, sweeping, circular movement around my front leg. But as I grow in my practice, I want that radius, that circle, to get much smaller. So I'm turning in a more concentrated fashion around my center. So the Tenkan itself is getting tighter, more concentrated around my center. But paradoxically, what's also happening is my body is more relaxed. So this tighter Tenkan is helping my entire body to relax more as my movement is concentrating more around my center. And in fact, one of the reasons that our radius in the Tenkan is so big in the early stages of our practice is because we're not as relaxed. We tend to be more rigid, more stiff in the early stages of our practice. So when we have a stiff, rigid body, and we do Tenkan, we have this big circle, right? Like a compass in geometry, or excuse me, a protractor in geometry, right? We have the big circle with our Tenkan. But as we become more relaxed, or as we tighten our Tenkan and become more relaxed, everything becomes a little smaller. And as we become more relaxed, and as the movement is concentrated more around our center, things speed up a little bit, or at least they seem to speed up a little bit. There's more energy going on in the movement. But I'm actually not trying harder. I'm not putting more effort or will into being fast. The energy is coming from the relaxation, the greater attention, and the concentration around my center. And this also goes for Irimitenkan. So we keep the tight, concentrated center, smaller radius in our movement with Irimitenkan as well. Okay, let's do Tenkan and Irimitenkan together. I'll count to 10 like we usually do in class. And let's do this in the fashion that we've been talking about. Trying to tighten up the radius of our Tenkan and trying to feel the relaxation in our body that that tightened radius, that concentration around our center creates. So let's start in right Hanmi and we'll do Tenkan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now left hand, Tenkan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now Irimitenkan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Alright, very good. Now that we've practiced Tenkan and Irimitenkan with focus on tightening up the radius of our Tenkan, tightening up the movement around our center, feeling that sense of concentration around our center, let's open that up a little bit. Let's do another round of Tenkan and Irimitenkan practice. And in addition to feeling our center and putting a lot of attention to our center, let's also feel our center line or our spine. So as we're turning, not just turning around our center, but we can also feel ourselves turning around our spine. And again, I want to also think about what my head is doing. I want my head to be on that even plane, looking out in a sort of expansive way. I don't want to be looking down. Right? I don't want to be tilted forward. head, my chin is on that even plane that we were working on when we were doing our Hanmi exercises. So let's start off in right Hanmi again. I'm going to try to feel my center line, feel my spine as I'm doing my Tenkan. And again, concentrating on the tighter, smaller radius for my movement. So from right Hanmi, reach, ni, san, shi, go, ro, shi, hach, ku, ju. Now from left hand, reach, ni, san, shi, go, ro, shi, hach, ku, ju. Now let's go back to right Hanmi and Irimitenkan. Reach, ni, san, shi, go, ro, shi, hach, ku, ju. So we'll finish just like we started with seated deep breathing. Left palm on top of right, thumbs touch. I breathe deep into my center. I concentrate on keeping good posture, but my spine wants to be relaxed and open and extended. My shoulders are relaxed, shoulders are above my hips.はい、ありがとうございました。